First of all, thank you so much for joining, everyone. Your time is super valuable, so I will make sure that we give you as much value from this webinar as possible. We will first have a poll that we will put up on the screen, but today's webinar is on remote and borderless benefits, how you can hire, attract, pay, and provide benefits across borders. Today we have SafetyWing, which is myself. I'm the head of revenue there. We have Oyster, we have Ben, as well as First Base. So I can't wait to introduce you guys to them and then start asking some questions. So Charles, if you want to go to the next screen. Today's agenda, as I mentioned, we will start with a poll to get an understanding of the makeup of the group today. Then we'll go into the panel discussion, and we will leave about 20 minutes at the end to answer your questions. We have found that in previous webinars, it's been super helpful to really give you guys some time to answer all of your questions. This way, it is a very useful time for you spent here. Okay, so you have a poll on the screen. Please select where you're at. I'm selecting. Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
so I'll just jump in real quick. Yeah, so I just put a poll up on the screen. The question is your organization borderless? This question will help our presenters today understand what the bulk of our audience is, but the answers are no, and we do not have plans to become borderless. No, but we do not want to become borderless in the future. Or sorry, we do want to become borderless in the future. Yes, we are in 2 countries currently. Yes, we're in 3 to 5 countries currently. Or yes, we are in 6 or more countries currently. We'll give everybody about 15 more seconds here.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. We've got about 80% has already voted. And share the results.
Nice.
All right, I'll let you talk to that, Lona.
This is cool. Yeah, so we are in 6 or more countries. That's a majority. That's really interesting to see. I would have voted for that last one as well. In SafetyWing, we are more in 6 or more countries as well. Very cool. Awesome. So let's go to the next slide. Great. So as I said, my name is Lana. I am the head of revenue here at SafetyWing. I'm also a YC founder, a Y Combinator founder myself. I am an advisor to many startups, and I am an original remote worker. Started doing this back when it wasn't popular. I had a dream that I wanted to see all 195 countries of the world. So I convinced my boss at the time to let me work remotely. Because I was a top performer, he let me do it. So I was able to get to about 80 countries, live in 4 continents, and really enjoy the fruits of working remotely. But now it's become more mainstream, which is really cool. And I'd love to discuss some of the interesting things around remote hiring and pay and benefits. So Charles, if you go to the next screen. I would love to briefly introduce you guys to SafetyWing and who we are. We are building a global social safety net for remote workers and distributed teams. What that means, we are offering this cross-border benefits. So health insurance, telehealth, like remote doctor, remote retirement is coming out soon, and life insurance, which really gives you this benefits package you can offer to your global team. In the past, this has been really hard to solve, so that's why we started this company 3 years ago out of Y Combinator, and we are solving benefits for many, many different startups and scale-ups. So if you have any questions, please let me know at the end. So remote work is here to stay, and many of you are doing it already. Even post-pandemic, we will see many companies stay remote and also do hybrid. Therefore, I gathered a panel of experts today, which I will go over a few questions. But first, I'll let them introduce themselves. We have Bruno, Adam, and David. So we'll first start with Bruno. If you can give us a bit of a background of yourself, turn on your camera, perfect. And then we'll go into the questions.
Hey everyone, super excited to be here. So I've been working in B2B SaaS startups for the past 5 years, and I started working remotely in 2018. And like Lona, it changed my life and enabled me to see the world and also move back to my home country in Portugal, where I'm based today. And I joined Oyster because I want to help more businesses and more people go remote. And so super excited to be here to discuss benefits and how to help more people do it.
Awesome. Adam, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thank you very much for this. And yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a VP of sales at First Base. I've been with First Base for about 10 months in the role. And yeah, it's a pleasure to speak. It's actually quite nice for me. So I'm currently based in Barbados, and I'm a customer of SafetyWing and using your one of your remote insurance products. So it's nice to be partnering with you on this panel today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. David?
Yeah, awesome. Hey guys, hopefully you can see me. I'm David, one of the co-founders and the COO here at Ben.
Video for some reason, but
yeah, never works as good. I'll try to hold on. Let me unshare and share it again, see if this works. But I'll do a quick introduction anyways, and then try to sort it out during the panel. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm David. I'm the co-founder and COO here at Ben, and Ben is essentially a all-in-one platform for companies that personalize benefits and reward that should work anywhere in the world. So we believe that, like all of you guys here, I guess that there should be no boundaries when it comes to talent, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to compensation, and we want to enable companies to be able to provide the best benefits and personalize it regardless of where they are. Now that in some cases that might mean partnering with folks like SafetyWings, in other cases might mean looking at local options depending on how many people you have in there. But really what we're about is the flexibility, and my background is originally in payments and financial services. I spent some time as a venture investor as well, investing into Series A companies, mostly in fintech and marketplaces, and essentially what we're building is a fintech enabled marketplace with Ben, and we can talk a little bit more about what that is if you are interested.
amazing. Thank you so much, David. That's fantastic. Hopefully we can get your video whenever you get a chance. But what I'll do now is go into the questions. We have a ton of really cool questions that I want to basically ask and then quickly go around with a sentence or two so we can get down the list as well as answer any of your questions you'll start putting in the question panel there. Awesome. So the first one, sorry.
And I'll just jump in, one quick housekeeping thing. There is a Q&A session at the end, so if you do have any questions at any point during this panel discussion, we will answer them at the end. So we have about 15-20 minutes set aside at the end of today. So use the questions queue in your control panel, put them in there. If it's a quick thing, I can probably answer it myself, just in text back to you. And then we'll get to the bulk of the questions towards the end. Thanks.
Okay, great. So the first couple questions are around attracting the best talent out there. The first question I'll ask is, how do I find pools of global talent? Are there certain sites that you would recommend? Maybe one of you would like to go for this, or all three of you, just let me know. Maybe Bruno.
Yeah, I can start. So there's a lot of resources out there to find great talent. I think, obviously there's great websites and like Remote OK and Remotive and other communities online that you can find great talent. One thing that has been working quite well for Oyster is to honestly past previous colleagues of other experiences, and so we've been getting really good traction a lot. Even the exec team at Oyster is a second founded team, so they've started, most of them were together in a previous company, and so I think that also brings a good result if that people like to work the first time together and they choose to work the second time, so that is usually a good sign. And so for us, has been tapping into each other's local and online networks, and that has been working quite well.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add, I completely agree with all that. I think what I'd add to it is, although, remote work obviously presents companies with a great opportunity to hire across border and to expand where you operate from an employee perspective, I think in many ways, employment markets still operate within individual countries. And so although by being remote, you might be able to hire in, wherever, South America or Asia Pacific or whatever for the first time, they still typically operate as segmented markets from a hiring perspective. And so I think it's still important to remember that. And so you're still often likely, obviously if you can leverage networks of people you know and worked with before, that's great. But if not, I think you're still likely to have to use, whether it's a local site or whether it's local recruiters to hire for the roles you're looking for. I think that's still likely to be the case. I think we're unfortunately, still quite a long way away from being in a position where we have a truly global employment market, which we can sort of pull from like one centralized place or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree 100% because there's a ton of websites that you can pull from that global market. And if you guys follow me on LinkedIn, I give quite a bit of advice in terms of where to find a remote job and how to do it. I think Oyster also has something really cool where it's the Oyster Academy, and you can really get started with remote work there. Just a couple things worth mentioning, some sites that are great that I've posted jobs, and that's where I get most of my leads from, people that want to work for us are remotive.io, remoteok.io, WorkEW, weworkremotely.com, Flexa Careers, remote.co. So there's a lot of different of websites out there. You can just do a quick search and like a bunch of them will pop up. Those have been very helpful for us. I don't know about you, David.
Yeah, I think, to us, it's as you say, we go after the best talent that we can find, and that usually means like tapping into local networks, as Bruno was saying, and whether that's people we worked with before or people who refer us to other people. Again, like to me, it's not like I'm looking to build a remote team, which might be a bit different. I'm trying to find the best people for the job, and I'll hire locally, I'll hire globally, I'll hire however we can. So I'm not like specifically targeting, hey, I have to go and hire people in wherever. It's more of like, let's find the best person we possibly can for this job, and whether it means local recruiters, networks, communities, that's probably the best thing that works for us.
That's awesome. That's great feedback. So then what are some things that I can do to make my organization more attractive to global talent? What I've seen at SafetyWing, when people come to us, they're like, hey, I really need to figure out benefits because, this one potential hire is looking at us, and also Google, but Google has this amazing benefits and we don't offer any, especially for international. Can you help us do that? Or they'll come to us and say, hey, my talent is leaving because we're not offering benefits like health insurance. What are some things that you guys are seeing out there to attract?
Yeah, I can start a little bit on that, because I think one of the things that we appreciate definitely at Oyster is transparency. So if you go, for example, to our careers page, you can quickly go into our Notion page and see a lot of the documentation we have. And so not only we have benefits there, like the health insurance that we offer via SafetyWing and other benefits like home office budget and other things, but we also have pages dedicated to how we work, how we function together as a team, how we look for candidates and what we're looking for in talent that works with us. So it's all about keeping this transparency. I think in that regard, that keeps everything quite open for the candidates and for people to take a look at. So when I joined Oyster, I had already a clear expectancy of things that they were offering me and things that I get access to, because they're already open and on the websites.
Yeah, I think, look, for me, obviously we are a global benefits company, right? So the thing that the answer is it really depends on location, right? So what's competitive in the UK is not necessarily what's competitive in the US, right? In the US, if you don't offer health insurance, good luck hiring anybody. While in the UK, like a lot of the best companies do it, but not everybody does it, and it's not compulsory. You have the NHS, which is great, and again, every country is a bit different around, what's the state system like, what is actually competitive. So to me, the first thing is figuring out, how competitive do you want to be in those local markets, and that means, it takes a lot of work, honestly, like to figuring out what should these packages look like, which I know that Bruno puts out and Oyster put out a bunch of content on this. We do some of it as well, and obviously so does SafetyWing. So that's a place to start. And then I think regardless of where you're providing benefits, the important is like you're personalizing, as we like to say, to what is actually important to the employee, right? Regardless of whether they are. So this could be health insurance because it's really meaningful to them. It could be life insurance because, you know, they just had a kid or something, bought a house and have a mortgage, and now they're worried about that. So it's always about, yeah, making sure that you're accommodating to the life stage in the specific geography that people are in. And that'll just depend person to person, company to company. But we can talk about, you know, what we see most remote companies offering as well, which, you know, involves core benefits, as Bruno was saying, involves a lot of other things like, you know, home office equipment, which is what First Base is here for as well. So yeah, it really depends, I think.
Yeah, I would concur, I would agree with all that. I think that what I'd add is that in many ways, obviously we are all, you know, operating in remote first companies, but in many ways, remote in and of itself is a benefit. But then, because, you know, many employees don't, you know, they've experienced remote, and that's something like a third of millennials now would refuse to do a job if their employers force them back to the office. And so, remote, in some ways, is a benefit. In some ways, is now sort of becoming table stakes for what employees expect. But obviously, with that creates both challenges and opportunities from a benefits perspective, because whereas before you may have had a big corporate office with a corporate gym, now all of a sudden, if you're not going into an office, you don't have that corporate gym anymore. So how can you sort of make up for that? Do you want to try and replicate that remotely, or do you want to try and do something different? So, you know, from a First Base perspective, we've seen some of our customers say, right, I mean, sticking with the fitness example, can we offer through First Base, can we offer exercise equipment, whether that's a Peloton bike or a treadmill or something like that? Or is it, should we just try and completely change how we're thinking about this and potentially offer, you know, maybe do more virtual things like virtual fitness classes, or maybe rebates for gym memberships or things like that? So I think you have to think about, especially if you were a company that was more office-based before and has shifted remote, you have to think about, well, what did we offer before, and how can we try and adapt to a more remote environment? And obviously, if you're a company that's always been remote, then you think about, well, what is the kind of culture we want to create? Do we want to focus on the employee work experience? Do we want to focus on actually sort of the life side things, as David was referring to, with things like the life insurance and stuff like that? Obviously, there's finite resources that companies have to be able to offer benefits, but within those finite resources, I think it's important that you have an end goal in mind for what you want to achieve for your employee experience, and design a package that has that end goal in mind.
Yeah, the only thing that I disagree there in a way is that you know, I wouldn't say necessarily you need to look at what were you offering before in the office, and now that, like, how can you replicate some of the stuff, because the things that you'll need if you're remote are totally different necessarily than the stuff that you might have offered previously in the office, right? So that's the only thing. I think it actually provides a fresh start where you can think about, okay, you know, we can't offer these things that we did anymore. What should we be offering? What is actually valuable? What do people care about?
Yeah, for sure.
I misspoke. I didn't mean replicate. I mean sort of try and sort of shift
Match.
and adapt. Yeah, exactly.
Like have really great benefits too for remote workers. So not just like, you know, when you were in the office, here's what you're getting. Now you're remote, you should still have amazing benefits, which, you know, one of those could be remote first as a benefit, or being nomadic, which we're also going to talk about this, if companies can allow people to do that, how do they do that legally? And Bruno can tell us how to hire contractors that are nomadic in different countries versus having to be in a home base. Like in the UK, you must be in London. So maybe we can transition to that question. So a question that somebody held in last webinar was, organizations often put a roadblock on the employee that needs to have a home base, and employers don't want to hire contractors because of their own internal policies and security issues. How do you solve for such a type of, I guess, conundrum? Bruno, do you think you can answer this question?
Yeah, definitely. It's a very common question during the sales process that we have, and even a lot of people come to us saying, I'm looking for a remote job right now, and can you help me with this, right? And we try our best to do here, because it is still quite complicated in a lot of countries to figure out each local law, because each country is different in that regard. But I think one of the things, there's a few things that you need to be aware of, right? One of them is, no matter where you are and how much you're moving, you always have a tax residency, right? And so there's always a place where you need to be registered at, and so usually that's a good starting point. Imagine that you're a nomadic person, and so you would need that place. But given that the place where you are in the world, one of the things that Oyster brings to the table is not just the payroll part of it, but also the compliance, right? To make sure that your contracts are locally compliant with local laws, that all the benefits, all the taxes, everything is in accordance to the law. But then obviously that also protects the IP and protects the company and the employee, right? And so that's one of the biggest parts of what Oyster could do, is that employ you by local laws and enable you, regardless of your location, to be legal in that country and operate as you would have for a local company in that sense. But it is a tricky subject, and it is something that people always have a lot of questions. I had that question myself when I started working remotely, and so it's something that we always like to answer and provide the best context possible to everyone that asks us, and so we're always available for any of those questions.
Cool. I don't know if it's relevant for Adam or David to talk about that, but I guess
yeah, no, I think the only thing for that I would add in terms of the taxation bit is super important, right? As in, like, especially when you're talking about benefits. What's interesting about benefits as well is actually, if you think about it, there are a lot of things that are framed as benefits, but we like to talk about this a lot, but they're actually a corporate expense, right? So again, you provide a home office budget, right? For as long as that the stuff belongs to the employer, that's usually like there is no tax liability on that, right? Because it's a corporate expense. And there's a lot of benefits like that you could potentially frame as a corporate expense, right? So things like learning and development is another really interesting one, or training budgets, those kinds of things. And then, every country will have its own things that are taxable, non-taxable. Certain like life insurance in the UK, for example, is not taxable, whereas health insurance is. And so it's just important that you recognize what those are, and then like compliance as a piece. The other point is contractors, right? I don't know if Bruno, you have actually I'll be ask questions, but like in terms of providing benefits to contractors, right? How much does that potentially imply another employment relationship, which could be really tricky as well, right? If you do want to be as compliant or squeaky clean. So there's always these trade-offs, right?
Definitely. I think like one of the things to add to the first point that you said is local laws keep changing. Like for example, now in Spain, you also have to have an option. You have to have at least some percentage of the salary as a home office budget. So even as an add-on, and so those things are values that and benefits that Oyster brings to the table, because every month there's always these occurrences, and we are the ones who are in charge of that and take that pain away from the people ops and HR people, but also from the employee side, which is usually the people where these things fall upon at the end of the day, right? And so on the contractor side is definitely more tricky. There's a lot of countries right now that are basically squeezing out the laws on this. Like if you're only working for just one company, it can be a bit tricky, because are you a contractor or a full-time employee, right? We also build a tool in-house at Oyster that everyone can access, which is a risk assessment tool to realize if you're actually a contractor or an employee, and you can actually work under each term under the law, right? For both for employers and employees. And so we give a lot of flexibility on our platform. So a lot of our contractors, the companies that are contracting them, can offer, for example, health insurance and pay themselves, but we also give the option for the contractor to acquire the health insurance on the platform for themselves, right? If there is an independent contractor want to have it. And so we want to open this to more and more things. And there's not enough safety wings for everything, for every benefit in the world just yet. But those are the sort of things that we're working on, which is to give flexibility, because like Lana said, it's 195 countries in the world, and each one is definitely unique.
Yeah, and I think that laws will be changing because it's unfair that you can say, oh, just because you're a contractor, you don't qualify for benefits. That should not be anymore in our vocabulary. So hopefully the municipalities and the different countries will come up with better laws to protect people and to give them benefits. Adam, did you have something?
No, I think it's pretty much well been said. I think the only thing I'd just add is that in many cases, if you shift to a model where someone is predominantly working from home, again, if you're shifting from an office-based to a predominantly remote-based setup, often that actually the nature of the employment contract has to change. And so in places like Canada and in several states of the US, you actually have to essentially agree new employment contracts with those employees because their primary working place has changed, and then there are implications from a legal and compliance perspective. And so that is something which I think that just sort of is sort of an example of companies have shifted how they operate because of the pandemic, and they've just sort of, in many cases, just muddled through because obviously it was an extreme circumstance. But actually, as we shift to a more normal way of working, which is remote first, I think a lot of the things that have just sort of been done to paper over the cracks and make it work will no longer work anymore, and companies need to think much more strategically, longer term, from contracts, tax, benefits, everything, because the way that it's been done over the last 18 months is in many senses not actually legally compliant, but just governments have been have been lenient because of the circumstances.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, I want to go more into the fun part of this webinar to ask some really interesting questions like the pay. So maybe we can dive into this and then just leave the last 20 minutes for questions for you guys. So my question to you is, how should remote first companies estimate salaries, or those companies that are hybrid or remote? Should it be country specific, which is unfair in remote setting? Should be a benchmark to the highest country? Somewhere in the middle? Or how do you think about equality in pay if an employee wants to move around every 3 months, which is myself? So, this year alone, I'll be living in like 5 different jurisdictions, anywhere from Puerto Rico to the US to Albania, Greece, you name it. So how do you pay someone like that? What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, I can definitely get started, but this is always a hot topic. And we, being with Oyster and us helping a lot of companies to employ people around the world, it's a very common question that companies ask us, and we try to give our best to help, right? And the truth is, right now, at least at Oyster, we don't have a strong point of view yet. We've started at the end of 2019, and so we're still trying to figure out a lot of this. And so we can't say one or the other in a lot of ways, right? For example, benchmarking with San Francisco is just not cost effective to build a company, right? But also, if you're remotely, why should you get paid less because you live in a certain country compared to a colleague of yours, right? So it's always quite tricky to go on this, and different companies will have different answers. I think the position that we take at Oyster is that no matter which policy you take, be transparent about it. And so communicate that to everyone in the company, and for everyone to have a clear idea of what you're doing and how you're doing it, right? And so that's what we try to do. We try to leave the door open for feedback. We try to ask questions to the rest of the team. We get constant questionnaires and questions around this to make sure that we get to a point where everyone's happy with it. And so we try to advise that to the companies. On the other side of people like you, Lana, that are traveling around the world, we don't, at least at Oyster, we don't change the salary and because of the countries you're at, right? What we try to do, and this is a lot of the values that are at Oyster, is that we're not only a remote first company, we're also async first in a lot of ways, is that we give the freedom for you to do and choose to do whatever is best for you and to do your best work, right? And so if that means for you to change countries every month, every week, every day, whatever that be, you have an expectancy of what work you will bring to the table. And so that's what needs to be done at the end of the day. So you only need a good, reliable internet connection to work with us. And if you want to change all the time, we're not changing the salary or anything like that. We want you to be flexible.
That's awesome. And I'll let David and Adam go next. But a really cool thing about SafetyWing is that as I'm moving around these different countries, I'm covered by health insurance, versus most health insurance will have you be covered just, let's say, in the UK because you're based out of there. The cool thing about SafetyWing is that I can go into different countries and still go see a doctor or go into the hospital, and I'll be fully covered with the insurance, which is something that not any other provider can do that. But yeah, you go ahead, David and Adam.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge benefit. We see that as well, right? When we're talking to companies around, hey, do you want a global plan? Do you want a local plan? What are you thinking about? Like it depends, right? Honestly, what's right for companies depending on, you know, a number of factors. But yeah, anyways, on the compensation side, like I'll go, you know, my personal perspective in this as well is to go for the what's locally competitive, right? And obviously, you know, there's great pros and cons arguments everywhere around why or why not you want to do this. I think even if I think about, you know, pre-pandemic, pre-borderless, global kind of distributed became more of a thing pioneered by, you know, some of you guys. You even have this concept of a CLA, right? A cost of living adjustment, which means, you know, like if you were living in San Francisco, you get a bit of a higher pay, and that was pretty accepted. And so it's interesting to have this kind of discussion again, and maybe it is time to revisit the concept. But in general, like I think as long as the employee is the one who's kind of making the choice of where to live and has that opportunity, then I believe in sort of paying local competitiveness. I also think that is unless sort of the company will force you to relocate somewhere, right? Then in that case, like you don't have a choice. So to me, I'm all about flexibility, employee choice, letting employees choose, being transparent about the policy, right? Hey, this is what we do, like this is what it would look like, and then like employees can choose what's best for them. So.
Yeah, I think like the cost of living adjustment thing, as you say, David, was driven, I think, largely because of if that's in an office-based world, companies force people to go to a certain office, they kind of have to reflect that in the pay. I think in the case, it's a tricky one. I'd agree with Bruno. Like I would say I'm not sure that we have a defined viewpoint on this either. I think the worst thing that you can do is, for example, what Google are doing, which is saying if you're remote and you're moving, then we're penalizing you and we're docking 10, 20, whatever % of your pay. Because obviously that is essentially saying you don't have to be in the office, but if you're not in the office, you're going to be you're treated as a second-class employee, which is not not the right way to do it. I think in terms of I think being locally competitive within a given country, I think is in my personal view, the best approach to it that I've seen, whereby, you know, in a given market. So, for example, in the UK, obviously London is the highest cost place in the UK, and where the salaries tend to be the highest. You sort of you normalize your pay structures around London within the UK, but that doesn't mean you have to pay London salaries if you're hiring in a country which is a much lower cost country. And I think that means you can obviously be competitive and in many ways generous within each country that you're hiring, but you're not hurting yourself, as Bruno said. If you're normalizing for San Francisco globally, that's just not a sensible way to do things from a cost perspective. I think the example of yourself, Lona, in terms of moving every month or two, that is inherently extremely difficult to address, because you can't change someone's salary every 2 months just because they happen to have moved to a different country for those 2 months. But equally,
why not, Adam?
Well, I think that the danger you have is that you're then just encouraging people to live in higher cost countries so that they can have a higher cost, higher salary, which is.
Yeah, they'll also be spending more, right? So.
I mean, it's true. I think ultimately, as I said, there's not a clear answer to this. I think, again, just my personal view is that an employee ultimately, even if an employee wants to move regularly, I think an employee ultimately should in some way, shape, or form nominate some kind of home market, whether that's, you know, US, UK, or whatever other country, and that probably would be where they would that's where their salary would be benchmarked.
Yeah, at SafetyWing, we do something where we pay everyone the same in terms of the strategy team. So kind of like strategy core team, which is, founders, and then everyone else, like heads of certain things like product and revenue, etc. And that's benchmarked in an amount that we think is fair wherever you are in the world, and it doesn't really change. And it's not tied to San Francisco, that's for sure, but it's also not tied to one of the less expensive countries. So it works out for our team so far. Of course, I don't know if it's the answer for everyone, but it's a way of doing something. So that's really interesting to hear.
I think it's just not changing the goalposts, right? Transparency, like, hey, here's the policy. And then as Adam says, like the worst thing you can do is be like, we're going to be like, hey, if you've made this decision in the past, whatever, we're going to change the way that this works, because then
Yeah.
it's always
Exactly. I love that what you said, David, is like, yeah, do the right thing for your contractors, for your team, for your employees. Always doing the right thing will pay off in such a big way. And this will go towards the next question that I'll ask, which is the unlimited time off, because it's really interesting to me to discuss this before we go into the questions that you guys have put in the panel. But this is something that's grown in popularity in the recent months. This actually used to be quite popular in Silicon Valley when I was living there, you know, a few years ago. I was a founder, and a lot of companies were like, hey, we have this unlimited paid time off. However, what I saw was that really no one was taking any time off. So it became this race of who is the busiest and who's working the most. And you see these people working 12 to 14 hours a day, being burnt out with this unlimited paid time off. So what we've done at SafetyWing, we've constituted a minimum amount of paid time off. So you have to take 20 days a month, a year, and that
20 days
actually
a month would be good.
is a great month. But yeah, the founders actually do this. They actually take vacation. They go 2 weeks away. This is great signaling for your team that they're able to also do something like that. So make sure that if you do have some kind of policy, make sure that the people at the top, the founders, the leaders, are actually taking the time off, and they're signaling the rest of the team to do the same. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you think about that.
Yeah, I would agree. In my previous company, actually, they initiated an unlimited time off policy, and as you say, actually the amount of time people took off went down, because there's kind of there are no guidelines anymore, and so therefore, it's, as you say, it's a race to the bottom of who can work the most. And so they had to subsequently change. I mean, they kept an unlimited time off policy, but they instituted guidelines of, it wasn't like a strict minimum, but guidelines that you should be taking at least, I think in their case, it was 15 days off a year. I think it's a nice in theory. I think in practice it doesn't work. I know in the UK, for example, there are legal requirements that you have to have a set number of days. I don't think, and maybe David might know differently. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's possible in the UK to just have unlimited and no set number of days. So yeah, I think in practice it doesn't really work, and having an actual number is a much better way of doing things.
Yeah, we kind of go with as well. I mean, the thing that's challenging as well is like what's competitive, right, for holiday days, again, differs by country. So you get back into the same problem, right? As in, like, do you offer everybody the same amount, or do you make it locally competitive, and by country. I think for us, like as well as like the thing that we ended up settling on is we actually have a set amount, and we think it's generous, but it's a set amount, and we actually only allow people to roll over a set amount as well, which means that, and I think again this is quite common before, but like encourage people to take it, right? If you don't take it, then you're going to lose your amount. And then I guess, Lana, as you say, it's all about like setting like senior team members setting the benchmark, and being transparent around it, because otherwise the more junior people will always be kind of on the backseat around hey, maybe I shouldn't take time off because nobody here is taking time off. So I think that's actually the extremely important bit, like how do senior team members set the example.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the biggest takeaway from here is that humans are weird, and because it's unlimited, then people just don't take it, right? It's a quite I know a lot of friends of mine that work in companies with that policy, and then that ended up not working, right? And some of them put like a minimum days per year to take. And so right now at Oyster, and this is something that can change in the future, is we have a specific set of amount of days per year. We've erased bank holidays as well, just because it doesn't make sense when we have people all over the world to have bank holidays per company. So you decide when you take your days off, and if you want to take the bank holidays, then go ahead, feel free to do that. And what we want to do is that give a generous amount to everyone in the company to make sure that you're taking care and you have more than enough time to do it, right? And then at the end of the day is exactly what you said, which is culture impacts these types of things. And so our exec team is very much against the hustle culture. They take time off, they turn off their Slack, their notifications. They try to keep as much possible away from the company. And so that, at least for me and a lot of the people that we talk to, is that empowers you to take that time off, right? And to feel okay in doing it. And I think one of the things that a lot of people fall prey in their remote work is that they need to prove all the time that they're working, right? And that's something that people used to talk quite a lot last year. People were burned out staying at home all day and doing that. And so I think not just taking time off, but actually shutting down the computer, keeping everything away from it. I think it's a huge way to do things. And if that starts with the exec team and with the CEO, and if he can do that, then I'm pretty sure that I can do that, right? And so that helps quite a lot.
I just sort of one final thought I'd add on this, and I think it's not specifically about time off, it's just about ways of working in general. Remote, I think, presents an opportunity to shift the focus of work from inputs to outputs. So if you're in an office, it's very easy to fall into the trap of FaceTime culture of what time did so-and-so get into the office and leave the office. Whereas obviously with remote work, because you don't have that, it's much more, it presents an opportunity to focus on what is actually being produced by that individual. So if you're an engineer, like what code are you writing? If you're in sales, what deals are you closing, etc.
Yep.
And I think that focus allows you to be to be a bit more strict on getting people to take time off, and people feeling comfortable taking time off because they can point towards the outputs that they are producing and the success that they have.
100%. Thank you for pointing that out. We only have 14 minutes left, so I would love to turn this over to our attendees. They have a bunch of questions that they have written down. I will let Charles help us and read some of the questions. He's our demand generation leader and the one who organized the webinar. So let's see here. I'll give Charles a couple minutes to pick a question or two. We have lots of questions here.
Yeah, give me just one moment here. So it looks like we have quite a few questions coming in. So if you have a question, please enter it into the questions queue in the control panel. But I'm just going to start right from the top here, and then you guys just feel free to jump in with your answers. Looks like we have about
maybe quick and short ones because we have a lot of questions.
So let's do like 1 minute answers tops, and then we can try to get through these as much as possible. All right, so first question, do you think the distinction companies make in their treatment of long-term contractors and full-time employees makes sense in a global marketplace?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, I'll repeat it. Do you think the distinction companies make in their treatment of long-term contractors and full-time employees makes sense in a global marketplace?
It's a good question. I think for us, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It just depends on your commitment to this person. So for example, to be hired in the core team or strategy team, you have to go through a lot of interviews and it's a big commitment. So that person is hired full time, whereas a contractor basis is when you need help, and then that help could become more permanent also. So it just depends on who you're trying to hire for which position, in my view. But
yeah, that's exactly the way we do it at OS.
To point Bruno, is like it's really challenging to hire globally if you don't have something like a remote payroll solution, which is why a lot of people end up doing contractors for a long time, but you shouldn't theoretically, right, because of compliance reasons and everything like that. So that's the only thing I'd say is like, hey, if this person's going to be there long term, like you probably need to sort out some solution for it. If you don't know yet, have them start as a contractor, and then in time you figure out what's the right relationship with.
Yeah.
Great. And solutions are out there, so like Oyster. Okay, we can go to the next one, Charles.
Cool, sounds good. Okay, so one issue we have with offering global benefits is that we hire a lot of our remote team on contracting agreements, and traditionally, legally, contractors shouldn't be offered benefits as they start to look like employees. How do you get around the compliance issue there?
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, go for it.
No, there's a term that it's I forget the name of it, but basically you have an interest in this person to be able to perform and to show up for the company. So therefore, you should be giving them benefits. Now, legally, there hasn't been a case that has gone to court, whether in Europe or in the US, that just because there's a contractor and you gave them healthcare or benefits, then you are in the wrong. But of course, I'm not a lawyer, so don't let my advice sway you. What I see is that there's an interest in these people that are working for you, and you want them to be healthy. Therefore, you're providing this benefit, in my view. But maybe Bruno or David can.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the role itself that they're providing the company. Is that a full-time role, as you would normally say? Like, is that 40 hours per week? Is that 10 hours per week? Is that a project-based one, right? It's quite tricky. Like, ideally, if that person is only working for you, then they shouldn't be a contractor, right? Because that way you're not compliant with the local laws, but also it can bring long-term problems both for the employer and the employee, right? And so even for a lot of people don't think about this when they start working remotely and started as contractors, which I did the same. There was no Oyster when I started. And what this brings is, like, for example, if you want to buy a house, then mortgage, it starts to get more difficult to get one, for example. And so it's quite important to give the right benefits and the right terms to the right things, right? And I think that's, if that person is a full-time employee for you and it's in your core team, then you should obviously put that person as a full-time employee, because that's what you would do if you were in an office.
Yeah, I would also say, just quickly, I'd say you can think a bit more broadly about what counts as a benefit. And so David mentioned earlier, like the provisioning of if a company, as he said, in most jurisdictions, if a company owns the hardware and is just essentially providing it to the employee for use, then that doesn't count as a benefit. That, as he said, counts as a corporate expense. And so, if you can provide that employee with an incredible work setup, but also, as I mentioned earlier, things like something like an exercise bike or whatever it might be, that is obviously a benefit to that employee, but it is ultimately not something that the employee owns or takes for themselves, then that's a way to give them that positive experience without incurring those risks.
Yeah, it also depends on what you prioritize, right? For example, if sort of reducing cost is the thing, maybe, like, again, in some jurisdictions, depending on what you offer, it might make it seem like there is an employment relationship, which would put you at all sorts of kind of compliance risks. But if you offered a budget or a reimbursement and said, hey, get your own health insurance and you can do it on here at SafetyWing, for example, that works, right? So you're just not getting like a group plan for a contractor, which, you're paying tax on it. Like, the contractor go and sorts himself out. You're just giving them a budget to be able to do that, which we see that being super common. The other thing that I'd add is, like, even gig workers, right? There's a bunch of companies who will offer benefits to, if you're an Uber driver, or if you're a TaskRabbit or something like that, and that doesn't even necessarily imply an employment relationship, and they do give benefits, health insurance, that kind of thing. So, it is possible. It's super tricky. And you just have to know what level of risk you're comfortable with, and there are multiple ways to solve this problem.
Yeah, and there are solutions, like you can get it from SafetyWing, you can get it from Oyster, you can get it from David's company, Adam. So there's a few different ways you can get those benefits. Just reach out to us. I guess maybe we have a couple more questions, Charles.
Yeah, it looks like we have 5 more, so we'll just try to get through as many of these as we can. And if we can't get through them, then we'll follow up with you after the fact. All right, so next question is, what systems and or services do you use to provide pay and benefits to employees and consultants around the world? We've kind of just talked about that, but it's one thing to want to allow folks to work from anywhere, but how can you actually deliver on those things and comply with national laws and practices? We've kind of covered this, but if there's any additional color that we can add to that.
Definitely. Maybe I can get started a little bit. That's a little bit on Oyster's wheelhouse in that sense. So feel free to reach out to me. My email is bruno@oysterhr.com. More than happy to answer all these nitty tricky details, because each country changes a lot, right? But what we do essentially at Oyster is exactly this. We're a distributed HR platform that is enabling you to work from wherever you are, right? And be compliant with local laws, getting paid in the local currency. And so that's exactly what we do. And more details, obviously there's our website. I can answer those questions without getting into a lot of details, but that's exactly, we built this in the background. And so we're offering this to employers, employees, contractors, to make it simple to have local and compliant contracts, getting paid, everything super smooth through our platform.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is I think obviously thinking about it from a first-base perspective, think about in many jurisdictions, especially in the West, the likes of the US, European Union, etc. Companies have a legal obligation to provide a safe working environment to their employees, and if they don't and their employees get injured, they get a repetitive strain injury or carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that, because they don't have the right equipment provided for them, then companies can be liable for that. We've seen several companies that we're talking to or have since become customers of ours have been sued by their employees because of this issue. And so this is something which companies, I think, especially large enterprise, global enterprise businesses, are becoming more and more aware of, and it's something that needs to be addressed so that the employees have the same kind of sort of safe environment from both their well-being, but also from a productivity perspective at home as they would have had or would have in the office.
That's a good point.
Cool. Move on to the next one here. Okay, so what is the risk to pay directly to employees and contractors overseas, considering your company is small and has no legal presence in the other country?
Bruno?
Yeah, I mean, that is totally illegal. So that's the short and sweet answer in this case. So both employers and employees are doing taxes, and there's a lot of all other legal things that depends on each country that you need to take care of. So you might get away with it, but you probably won't. And so definitely, I'm not a lawyer as well, but I definitely don't advise you to do that.
Cool. Yeah, so the next question was kind of related, so I'm going to skip that one and move right to this next one, which I thought was interesting because we talked about the pay in different geographic locations, but this person's asking a slightly different question about the different benefits. Like, I'll just read the question, but with all the different social security, health, pension, insurance in different countries, how do you make your benefits fair across all, and how do you find out what is normal in each market?
Yeah, it's actually a huge thing for most companies, right? How do you know what's competitive? How do you know and it's different, right? Usually the conversation that we have is like, what's statutory? What do you have to offer? And if you don't offer it, you're in breach of compliance, right, with the law. Again, pension in the UK, auto enrollment, you have to offer it. If you don't offer, you're in breach. Other countries don't have that necessarily. And I think one of the things that is pointed out is like every country is changing this so often, right? So we're looking at Germany, for example, is potentially introducing something like that. Obviously, these things take time, but that is the tricky bit. Compliance, competitive, or if you want to be at the like leading side of things is usually the conversations that we have, and it's totally dependent on also that not only location wise but the type of talent, right? So like who you're trying to attract, what are they asking for? And again, to us the most important thing is like being flexible, letting people choose, and having a system that facilitates that helps, whether it's SafetyWings, whether it's Ben, whether it's stuff like First Base, be able to let people choose.
Yeah, what I wanted to add actually is that what we've seen from some of our clients is that they used to offer stipends, but then those did not become fair, because if you have like a baseline for the stipends, $100 in the US is different than $100 in Albania. Therefore, how do you make it fair across the board? Therefore, they came to SafetyWing and said, okay, like now we just want to offer health insurance to everyone, no matter where they are, and it'll be fair to everyone, because we don't just like give them like an amount which might not cover them in somewhere like the UK. So we saw that they solved that piece to be more fair through actually offering the benefit versus just the money part. But that's all I have to say from my side.
Which is true. I think it goes back onto you know, what it goes back to total reward, as I like to say it, right? What's competitive totally? You're thinking about benefits in isolation. You need to think about benefits as a component of equity, of bonus, of total pay, of salary. So, you know, there's no clear cut answer, I think. And in, you know, some clients that we work with will say, hey, just provide an amount and let people pay for their own stuff, and the amount that you give is different depending on what location they're on, right? Again, different ways of approaching the.
Yeah, but when they were surveyed, I think the #1 benefit that people wanted was health insurance. So a lot of want that. So that's interesting in that regards. Cool. Oh, we're at time, guys. We have to end to respect everyone's time. It's on the hour. Please reach out to us. You have our emails, or you'll get an email after this webinar with the recording. Thank you so much, Bruno, Adam, David. Thank you for being on the panel. It was a pleasure.
Definitely. Thank you so much for
really
having
enjoyed
us.
it. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thanks. Bye, guys. Thank you,
Cheers,
everyone who attended. Bye. Okay. How do we end this?